Would you say that you like sports? Well, my guest today really likes sports. Beefy Blake, welcome to Engage.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to catch up with a fellow Welshman.
Yeah, this is actually one of the main reasons why I wanted you on the show, because I don't think there are enough Welsh people on on the Engage show. Even if you are something of an Australian these days. But the reason why I did want you on the show today is because you are officially the world's number one sports fan according to the Guinness Book of Records. So I'm really keen to talk to you about your story about that overall, and how all that came about, and everything. But I think one of the more pressing matters here that I think I need an answer to is, how on earth did a guy from Newport end up all the way in Australia? If you could try and clarify that for me, first of all, that would be really, really good.
Well, it's a bit of an interesting story. I actually got sponsored to come and play cricket, weirdly enough. Yeah, a Welshman that plays cricket overseas, which is a bit of a rarity. There was a club up in Queensland looking for an overseas player, and the year before, I think Adrian Dale had come out and played, and I was just in the right place at the right time, and this club were desperate for me to come and play. Well, they weren't desperate. I made them desperate. But yeah, I used to play for Newport. I had a few sessions with Glamorgan. I was there in '92, same time as Viv. So I was vaguely handy playing cricket. I never really took it seriously, but I got an opportunity to come out here and yeah, did my contract and stayed here ever since. And yeah, it's a still 26 years later. It's a bit of a tug on the heartstrings whether I'd want to come back to Wales or not. But yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, I think you probably made the right choice overall, actually.
Yeah, well, you never know.
But you're originally from Newport, now in Australia. You've also lived in the USA for a short time in between.
Yep.
You've played a multitude of sports overall. You just mentioned there that you played cricket professionally. You've done that in the UK. You've done that in Australia. You've played rugby in the USA. You even put together an Aussie rules team, or a Wales Aussie rules team, for their World Cup in 2015 as well. And all of this is before you embarked on this round the world tour, which meant that you became the world's number one sports fan, where you watched 306 different sports in just 365 days. So, I mean, just before we get into all of this stuff, you mentioned Newport just now. Can you just give us a little bit of background about where you grew up? Presumably you must come from a sporting background overall.
Yeah, my mum and dad were very sporty. My mum was involved with Welsh athletics for many, many years. In fact, at one time she was kind of the head coach for track and field, cross country, relays, road running. She was across the whole lot. She was heavily involved with Newport Harriers. So I kind of grew up in an athletics family. And, you know, I grew up with people like Jamie Bolsh and Colin Jackson and Nigel Walker, people who were around all the time, and Kirsty Wade, the hurdler, as well. So, Kay Morley, the hurdler, and Kirsty Wade was the middle distance runner. So I was around athletics people all the time, and I reckon from the age of about 4, all the way through till growing up, and probably still today, I was always at some sort of sports event. If I wasn't at athletics with Mum, my old man took me to Rodney Parade to watch the rugby, or Somerton Park to watch the county. So always involved with sport in some manner. So I guess just through sheer osmosis, it's ingrained in my blood. But I went to Monmouth School from Newport, which is a rarity in itself, I guess. So as you well know, Monmouth School is heavily involved with sports. When I was there, you know, they didn't even play football. It was rugby, and cricket in the summer, or if you wanted to be a rower. So they were the kind of the three main sports, and I didn't want to be a rower, so I ended up playing cricket, although my old man played cricket for Newport for a long time. And I ended up playing rugby there, even though I guess growing up in Newport, it was really football for me. And it was a real hard decision going to Monmouth. And when you first got there and they said, yeah, there's no football here, and it's like, what do you mean there's no football? Yeah, we play rugby, and that's it. Actually, in 1992, I was the school's first ever football captain. So that was the first time they'd ever played football. So their one-off game against Christ College Brecon, that was me. But in terms of that, I made my first ever senior cricket appearance when Newport thirds or Sundays were short. I was 10 or 11 years old. I think my dad got naught that day and I got 2 not out batting at number 11. So that was my introduction into senior cricket. And I kind of really, I guess, edged into cricket more and more as I was growing up. So in terms of that, cricket became my game, although I did still play rugby, obviously, at Monmouth. That's what you did.
So when you were growing up, then playing all of these sports, were you one of these really annoying kids at school who were just great at all sports, rather than just perhaps picking one sport you were really good at? You were just good at all of them.
Yeah, I think so. I hate to say it, but we played, I mean, being in Newport, and obviously you're from Cardiff, we played baseball as well at primary school. And I think I was the Newport primary school's captain or something. I can't really remember. I think we played one game. But yeah, we played baseball all the time, which is, unfortunately, I read a lot about how, the baseball in South Wales is dying a death, unfortunately. I know down at Grange Park it's made a little bit of resurgence, but I think there's only one club in Newport nowadays, which is really sad. But I forgot to mention that I was Gwent under-11s backstroke champion as well. So, I was a bit of a swimmer, baseball, football, basically any sport. But that's a great story. I entered into the freestyle race, and when you're a kid, there's a few freestylers and there's a few backstrokers. And I came second. I thought, a bit dirty with that, finishing second. But apparently I was the first backstroker in, so I was the Gwent under-11 backstroke champion. So that's another honour to my long list of sporting achievements. But there you go.
You went on to play cricket. You just mentioned there, outscoring your dad there. You played you played for Newport when you were 16. You mentioned in some of the details that you gave me earlier that you played against the late, great Shane Warne as well. Can you remember anything from that experience?
Obviously, with what's gone on recently, I've had to talk about this a little bit, but I was 15, 16, and it was a Saturday morning, and the boys, I think somebody got injured or couldn't make the game, and I got a phone call because I was playing with the third team, I think, and they said, we need a fielder, can you come and play? And I was, I'll go. And it was against a club called Imperial in Bristol, and their overseas player that year was Shane Warne. And I'm going to be honest, apart from noticing in a shortish, stocky, let's say stocky-ish, he's passed away, so we'll call him stocky, we won't call him fat. He had a blonde peroxide mullet. He smoked all day. The club Imperial in Bristol were the tobacco company, so they paid him in smokes. So in terms of that, but I don't really remember him like being this outstanding, the world's best ever spin bowler at the time. I don't think he went through us. Imperial weren't a great club back then, but nothing really outstanding to me in terms of his performance or runs or wickets or whatever. I think Newport won pretty comfortably that day. Like I said, I was the 11th man. I was a fielder. It was my debut for the first team, and it just so happened I was playing against Shane Warne. Later down the track, when I was living in Melbourne, I ran a synthetic grass company, and years later I actually installed his tennis court for him at his new house at a fairly exclusive suburb, and we did get to chat about his time in the Western League. So he didn't remember me either, though.
What year was that then?
1989, 1990, around there.
My cricket knowledge isn't that great. Was he established as a great player at that point then?
No, definitely not. It was actually because he had essentially failed at Australian rules football playing for St Kilda here. He was told to get it out of his system and go overseas and play cricket, because obviously the Aussie rules season is the same as the British cricket season. So he basically, because they didn't want his failed dream of playing Aussie rules to get in the way, they moved him they got him a deal to go and play overseas. So That's how he ended up over there. So no, he was making his way into the game, put it that way.
Okay, so at least you played some small part then in his escalation
Yeah.
to one of the greats overall. Now, you've
Yeah.
also mentioned as well in some of the details that you sent me that age 17 playing for Glamorgan at this time, when you were there at the same time as Viv Richards, who's another legend in the sport. You mention an incident as well. Can you elaborate on what that is, please?
Yeah, we pre-season, well, not pre-season, early season net, so April time. It was school holidays for me, so a load of people got asked to come and do a net session or go and play with all the Glamorgan lads, in a full net session. So all the pace bowlers are in one net, and we get there fairly early, and all the old boys are there: Matthew Maynard, Hugh Morris, Steve Watkin, Crofty, Metson. They're all there. Viv is hanging around at the back of the net, just walking around, no bother, chatting to a few people. He laughed every other word, basically. It was just this big guffawing laugh, and he was there chatting away. We bowled and bowled and bowled, probably for an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. All of a sudden, Viv gets up, walks off. Oh, what's going on here? And 5 minutes later, he's back with his pads on. He wanted to face the seam bowlers, so he comes into our net. There's 5 of us there in this one net in particular. So Viv kicks whoever's batting out. He says, right, I'm coming into bat. So first ball, one of the lads kind of steams in, and he just picks it up straight, hits him back over his head, no bother at all. And I thought, oh, here we go, we're in for a bloody torrid 15 minutes. We'd already been bowling for ages as well. So this happened the next 3 times as well. Then I came in, put one on a length to him, and he absolutely smashed it back at me. I just got out the way, and I thought, oh, here we go. And I took a few steps down the net, and all of a sudden Viv picks the bat up and starts walking out. And I said, Viv, what are you doing, man? You've only just come in. He goes, Beefy, man, I'm hitting them all right. There's no need to practice today. And he just walked off, and that was it. So, I mean, he was 41 back then, but he was still, without any hesitation, just hit the ball in the middle, just drove it easily. What a great man. What a great man.
But your career at Glamorgan didn't last very long. You didn't get the opportunity to turn professional.
No, that was it, actually. Weirdly enough, I got a weird back injury. So if you imagine on the top of the left side of your hip, as I was bowling, as it kind of released, the side muscle got tangled in the top of the joint, and that was that. So yeah, I had to have a year off, and obviously they weren't going to take me on with that injury. So yeah, there was a bit of a struggle that year, but yeah, in terms of that, I slowly got back into it, and after that, finished off school and went to Sheffield University, and ended up, weirdly enough, when I got to Sheffield, I ended up playing a bit in the South Riding League, the Yorkshire League up there, and yeah, it was, I don't know, I wouldn't have made it as a professional to be, as a full-time professional, I wasn't dedicated enough, and I came to learn that when I came back to county cricket when I was 30 years old. If there's one thing I've got to tell people is, you got to believe in yourself. If you get opportunities, then bloody well take them, because if you don't take it seriously, in today's world of professional sport, you ain't never going to make it if you don't take it seriously. And I'm probably tantamount to that, really.
And when you went to Sheffield University, that's where you tried your hand at rugby league. And I believe you played one game of rugby league, but that was enough for you to get picked for the Great Britain students team.
No. That's a bit of a you've got 2 stories crossed over there. So when I got to Sheffield and moved in, the guy that used to live in the halls next to me was a massive rugby league head, and he knew we'd been chatting and everything. And he knew that I played rugby union all the way, and I was still coming off, playing for Monmouth and elsewhere. And it was early in the year, and he said, "Look, the rugby league team are a bit short. Do you fancy coming and having a bit of a train and a tryout?" And I went, "Yeah, of course, I'll come and play." So went to training, and they were basically short. They didn't have enough people for the annual Sheffield University versus Sheffield Poly or Sheffield Hallam University game. Now, that game is normally, I guess, halfway through the year, but because Sheffield Eagles were playing the Australian Kangaroos in a kind of touring game, and this Sheffield University versus Sheffield Hallam University game was the curtain raiser. So boys are a bit short. I was quite big. They liked the way I ran the ball, liked the way I tackled, and so I was on the bench in my one and only game in front of 20,000 people at Don Valley Stadium as the curtain raiser for Sheffield versus Australia. So yeah, that was my only game of rugby league. I quickly realised that rugby league is not the game for me, I tell you.
So what was the game against Germany?
Okay, so my first year at university, I actually played American football for the university team up there. And we had quite a successful season. But we played up in Gateshead, so I don't know what, probably Durham University, I guess, is up there. And not only did I play tight end and fullback, I also did the punting and place kicking and everything else. So I was up there and, I had a good day punting. And the guys from Durham University came back to me after the game and said, look, we've got a game against the German students. They're coming over next week. This is Great Britain students. Do you want to play? And it was like, of course I want to play. I'm playing for Great Britain students here. So after going to Gateshead a week before, went back to play for Great Britain as part of the Great Britain students team taking on Germany at Gateshead Stadium there. So, yeah, I had I never really thought about it before. I had a great first year at Sheffield University. So, not only did I play rugby league in front of 20,000 people, but I played for Great Britain students against Germany, and we got smashed. The Germans were very, very good.
How did you end up going to Texas?
I mean, that's kind of what got me into wanting to go to university in the States. I know you touched on it very, very quickly but I did end up going to the University of North Texas with a view to trying to go and play American football over there. So we got there in August in a little town called Denton. Now, Denton is about 30 minutes north of Dallas. 66,000 people live in Dallas, but there's 3 universities there. So when it's university, when they're on holidays, there's only 20,000 people live in Denton. There's 45,000 students in Denton. So it's a big party town, really. So I went there with a view to possibly seeing if I could play American football over there. Went there, went to a session, started kicking the ball. The coaches said, "Oh, we like you. You can kick the ball quite well. You're a little bit different to what we got. Would you like to join the team?" And I went, "Well, that's what I'm here for. Why don't we see where this goes?" So I went into a meeting with the guys that were meant to sign you up and put you on the teams and everything else. And they asked me what I was doing in University of North Texas. I said, I'm an exchange student. And they went, if you're an exchange student, you can't play. You have to transfer. And I was like, well, I was trying to be a professional cricketer. I wanted to ever go at American football. Now they're asking me to fully transfer to an American university with no guarantees. And I thought, yeah, perhaps I don't want to be an American footballer, even though I would have loved to have a go at it. So it turns out as well, the guy that ended up punting for University of North Texas ended up playing in the NFL for about 10 seasons and went on to win a Super Bowl. So could it have been me? I don't know. Who knows?
So your American football career was cut short prematurely, but it wasn't that long before you started throwing a rugby ball around. How did that happen?
So I was out watching the North Texas soccer team play, and I was up in the stand. It was halftime, and we looked over the back of the stand. I was with an Aussie guy and saw a load of blokes throwing a rugby ball about, and I thought, well, this could be interesting. So went down. Turns out Denton had a rugby team. So instantly we went and joined the rugby team, and from there, I think that year, the best thing about all the rugby teams in Texas, like there's 30 teams in the Texas League, every team is based in a pub. Now, I was only 19, so legally I wasn't allowed to drink there, but under the auspices of playing rugby over there, I got taken under the wing and we had a pub to go to, no questions asked. So fantastic. So that year playing with Denton was absolutely brilliant. Got to see the whole of Texas. We actually made the Texas Championships. We won the Texas Championships in San Antonio. Now, while we were at the Texas Championships in San Antonio, Blackheath under 21s were touring Texas at the time, and I played against them when they were in Denton. It was the first game of their tour, but they ended up playing against Texas Collegians. Now, the coach for Texas Collegians found out that I was at college at UNT, and he said, "We've got a couple of injuries. Can you come on the bench? We'll use you if, guys can't carry on." So ended up being on the bench because I'd already played Friday and Saturday, and the final was on Sunday for the Texas Championships. So I was on the bench for Texas, and sure enough, after about 5 minutes in the second half, their number 8 got injured, and I ended up playing for Texas Collegiate. So, yeah, represented Texas at rugby as well as other things. So, over there, but we won the Texas Championship that year. We won the Western Championships that year, which got you into the National Championships. And, Denton got to his first ever National Championships. We lost both games, but for a town so small with such a limited reach to get to a national championships in the States is unreal.
Yeah, it sounds like a fantastic experience overall, and that you could get a drink out in Texas as well, which is fantastic without getting ID'd everywhere you go, which has been my experience on the couple of times that I've been to the US as well. Just skipping forward a bit, then I just want to touch briefly on this Aussie Rules World Cup team that you put together, the Welsh Aussie Rules World Cup team. I mean, how did all of that come about?
Okay, so they run a World Cup every year to get teams involved playing more Aussie rules, especially there's loads of expats across a wide variety of cultures in Melbourne especially. So I run the Welsh Down Under Facebook group. Now we've got about 3,000, 4,000 people in there. So naturally the person that wanted to contact me from the AFL said, "Can you get a team together?" And I thought, well, why don't we get this team together and see what we can do? So I ran around trying to find any vaguely athletic Welsh person that might want to represent Wales playing Aussie rules. And sure enough, we managed to scrape together 20-odd people of varying degrees. One of the lads used to play basketball for Wales. He was actually out here playing Aussie rules. He had got spotted playing for Britain, and some local club had kind of recruited him to kind of come over and play. We had blokes that have used to play rugby, all sorts. Now, the problem with this World Cup that they play is, like, you play against Macedonia or Greece or Italy, over half of their players are kind of third generation. Half of them had never even been to Italy or Macedonia or Greece, So in terms of that, you're playing against Australians. So the fact that out of our 25 strong squad, 21 of us were born in Wales with very little experience. The fact that we won our first ever game against the Netherlands was a story in itself. We ended up beating Ethiopia in the last game. We gave Macedonia a bit of a scare early on. We played against an indigenous Australian team as well. But just a great experience. I met some great people through there. I can proudly say I was the first ever captain of Wales's Aussie Rules team.
So where did this idea then come from that you were going to travel the world and try and take in as many sports as you possibly could in a 1-year period?
You know what, Dave? This is the strangest thing. So I was playing football when I first came to Australia to play cricket. In between cricket seasons, I ended up playing football for a local club. Now, there was a few British lads that played. We used to go out in a pub in Brisbane for, every Saturday night after we played. And we were just having a few drinks. And all of a sudden it was like, how many sports do you think there are? And it was, 200, 100, whatever. And then how many sports do you reckon you could go and see or go and play? And the more we talked about this, the more this kind of idea kind of festered in my head. And I think the original idea was 365 days of sport, 365 days of beer. I think, go and see a sport locally and then try the local tipple. So I think that was the initial idea. Now, I've got to say, that was in about 1997 or 1998. Now, I sat on that idea, and there was about 4 or 5 other people with me. I sat on that idea for about 10, 12, 13 years. Didn't tell anyone. Because it just sat with me and saying, this is such a good idea. Somebody is going to do this. If I don't do it, so I didn't tell anyone for a long, long time. And then I thought it would be the type of thing I might go and do by myself, write a book, do whatever. And I kind of, I guess, I had a bit of a midlife crisis along those lines. And I thought, if I don't do something about this now, I will regret it for the rest of my life. So I started just putting lists together of sports. So it literally started football, tennis, cricket, golf, bang, bang, bang. And I started to work out, could I do 365 different sports? So I started doing those lists. Then I started putting some dates and events and everything to those dates, to those sports, to see if there was some way I could do this. Now, what was happening is the list was getting longer and longer. The events were there. As I was coming back to check, where's the World Croquet Championships this year? And it was like, it was in Surbiton and it was in May, but now they've moved it to Florida and it's now in July. And it was like, so I kind of was toying that. So in the end, it took me 3 years of solid planning, full-time. It was basically a full-time job outside my full-time job, just to do it, just to work on the plans. And then, so I was in a flat in Melbourne. We had a room to rent. This Kiwi lad moved in. He was in a band. He was studying screenwriting. He wanted to be a comedian. He was good company. And I started thinking about how we could kind of make 365 days of sport tangible. And I thought, perhaps we turn it into some sort of web show or do something with it, offer sponsorship, do bits and pieces. Everyone wants to go viral. They want to make a name for themselves. If TikTok was around, we would have made millions probably, but that's another matter. So I put it to him. I said, look, this is the plan. Are you interested in doing something? And he went, yeah, travel around the world, go and watch sport, doing a few bits and pieces here and there. Yeah, let's do that. So, yeah, that was the idea. It was a 15-year-old idea that just manifested in my head, and I kind of just built it up and built it up. And like I said, it took 3 years of solid full-time planning just to see if it could be done. Now, in the end, there's a reason why it's never been done before. It's near enough impossible. So, just to even get close was interesting enough.
You mentioned there about TikTok. If TikTok was around back in the day, you'd have made millions. I think something like this would work really well for social media. But did you try to pitch your ideas to any TV companies or anything like that? Because you mentioned there that it was quite easy to get media accreditation.
Yeah, we pitched regularly for coverage and PR and everything else, and that became our major downfall actually, in not having somebody look after us and get us a few more gigs, because Australia was good, New Zealand was good, UAE was good, Britain was okay. We did a few bits and pieces over there, but the biggest downfall to us was the USA. We got nothing, absolutely no media coverage in the States, which was in the end probably what caused us. We've always called this the greatest successful failure of all time, because me and Rob, we went through we did 6 months together, and then totally ran out of money. So Rob went back to work and I finished it off myself. And the goal for this whole thing was to try and turn it into a TV show. It still is, by the way. If anyone's watching and they're in TV land, please get in touch with me, because I've got this concept that's that needs exploring. what I was kind of looking to do down the line is if somebody wanted to do a version of 365 days of sport, say 365 days of golf or 365 days of cheese or wine or whatever takes your fancy, we could put a model together for them to go and do that. And so there is scope for the development of this into a series of some nature. But in terms of that, we had a lot of conversations, and it was just a bit too difficult to get up. And you're talking about two blokes, really, doing this off their own back. The fact that we got so much and so far into it and have got a product that is actually fairly professional is is a miracle in itself. I'm going to be honest with you. But in terms of that, it was fantastic. So never say never on the fact that we might even do this again.
Yeah, even if you didn't quite get what you wanted from it, in terms of what you've just described there, you did have a number of opportunities along the way, one of which being when you went to see the Formula One in the UAE, and you managed to land yourself an interview with Daniel Ricciardo. Can you tell us about how all of that came about?
Yeah. So Rob used to be in a band in New Zealand. They were called Revolver. Now, one of the members of that band works for Red Bull in the States, looks after their music festival. So if you know anything about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, as soon as tickets go on sale, there's none on public sale because all the corporates buy up every single ticket. So we're in Abu Dhabi, we want to get to the Formula One, we can't get a ticket anywhere, so we messaged Steve in the States and said, Steve, Red Bull have got a team, get us some tickets because otherwise we're going to stuff this up. So apparently there's bits and pieces behind the scenes went on, but at the end of the day, we heard nothing back from Red Bull. We managed to get some tickets through friends of friends of friends in Dubai, and we did get to the Grand Prix. Now, when the Grand Prix was sitting in the stands, the Grand Prix kicks off, and we thought, oh, we're in for an easy afternoon here, 2 hours of watching these cars go around, not thinking anything. It's just going to be laid back. We don't have to film much or anything. We don't have to talk to anyone. Brilliant. Got a day off, basically. Second lap of the race, Rob's phone goes off, and he's going, oh, who's this? All of a sudden, he gets a text message, and he goes, this is a UK number. He goes, oh, yeah. And all it said is, your interview with Daniel Ricciardo is confirmed for 11 o'clock tomorrow morning at the Ritz-Carlton in Abu Dhabi. And we thought, what interview with Daniel Ricciardo? And he said, I don't know, just read this. So he gives me the phone and says, yeah, your interview with Daniel Ricciardo. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, I've got to go and do an interview with Daniel Ricciardo tomorrow. I'm going to be honest, I've never really interviewed too many, well, especially high-profile people. And I'm thinking, so my heart just sinks, and I think, I ignore the race, what's going on. I'm thinking constantly about, I've got to interview Daniel Ricciardo tomorrow. And we're only, a month into this whole thing? Yeah, and I'm just thinking, if I stuff this up, we're dead for the rest of the trip. So in terms of that, yeah, I managed to pull it off. If you ever see the Daniel Ricciardo interview that I did, it's absolutely fantastic. He got into the spirit of things. Great guy. There's a reason why he has a big smile on his face all the time. Very easygoing. He was fantastic with us.
Yeah, I watched that interview yesterday. Actually, it was really good. I was thinking to myself that for somebody who's a multi-millionaire elite Formula One driver, he was very down to earth. He seemed to be enjoying himself during the interview and seemed quite happy to be spending the time with you.
Yeah, he did actually say, and I'm not blowing smoke up my own arse here. He did actually say that was the best interview he'd done that year. So considering it was the end of the season, I was quite happy with that. And so apparently, Steve, who I talked about, who works at Red Bull in the States, was in Austin, and Red Bull were doing a testing session there, and he walked into the office, and Ricciardo was there, and Steve went to chat to him and said, "Oh, you got interviewed by two of my mates, and this and that." He goes, "Oh yeah, I meant to catch up with those guys and see how they were going. The concept was brilliant." And he goes, "Oh, I'll just get too busy." So yeah, it was great that he remembered us. That's the one good thing about it, and we made a little bit of an impression on him. He was actually quite impressed about the stuff I managed to find on the internet the night before, basically.
Nothing like going into an interview totally prepared, right?
Oh, exactly. Oh, look, we talk about going viral and stuff like that. We actually proposed to him about throwing him in the pool or getting in an argument and doing stuff. He was up for it. But the worst thing was, we were at this swanky hotel, and I'm talking Abu Dhabi, the Ritz-Carlton. It is so swish. I mean, you've seen the interview. The backdrop is absolutely phenomenal. When we first started doing the interview, there was like 4 people sitting on the grass watching it happen. By the time we finished the interview, so at 20, 25 minutes, there was about 60 people watching. And I'm thinking, oh, we can't do this now. We can't do a bloody stupid prank like in front of all these people, because it would just look so bad on us. And yeah, it was in the end, yeah, we were trying to portray this professional outlook about what we were there to do. So in terms of that, yeah, no, it is. I'm actually, in all fairness, and I'm actually really proud of that interview. It was something that, you know, if I ever make myself into a media career, something I can go back to and say, yeah, well, I managed to do that, and this guy enjoyed it. We can do something a bit different. So in terms of that, it was very good.
So you were attracting this crowd when you were doing the interview, but I've also read as well that you were attracting quite a lot of international media attention for your exploits around the world. Can you tell us a bit about that?
We were actually in the UAE for the World Air Games, so we rock up to get our media accreditation, and it's the worst organised event of all time. Anyway, so we go into this media room, and there's journalists there, and I say to these people, I say, oh, we're here from 365 Days of Sport, and this woman puts her hand and says, oh, we've been expecting you. And really? Okay. And she says, come with me. And she introduces me to this guy, and he goes, this is whoever he's from the local paper. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, right, local paper, no worries. All of a sudden, I've got 4 people around me, and they're all asking me questions in Arabic about what we were doing and how we came to be there, and this guy's translating, and unbelievable. So we're there for 15 minutes, 4 journalists, or 3 journalists, and this other guy asking questions about what's going on, how come, bang, bang, bang. Get the Dubai Times or whatever next day, there we are. We're on the front page of the Dubai Times about us managing to be in Dubai for the World Air Game. It was just, like I said, the things that just happened along the way are just unbelievable. And yeah, that happened a lot more often than we thought. Like, they do, there's a daily sport paper there. In fact, there's a Welsh guy that is the sports editor for Sport 360 in Dubai. And we got, double page spread of us being in Dubai about what was going on and things like that. So in terms of that, it just the things that happened, just people covering us, I'd obviously do a check for our social media, what was going on. I'd find newspapers in Peru and Chile covering what we're doing, and it was amazing. It really was.
Yeah, reaching all 4 corners of the globe here as well.
Apart from America.
Yeah, you don't exist in America, no.
No, I know, yeah.
But you must have seen a load of sports during your time on this quest around the world there. What would you say was the most brutal sport that you watched overall?
Jousting.
They still do that?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. Yeah, this is exactly right. So we just happened to go to this jousting. It was a medieval fair, and I said to Rob, we were in Texas, and I said to Rob, we're going jousting today, and he went, oh yeah. And he thought it was this kind of World Wrestling WWF style jousting. I think they call it medieval times. There's like a theatrical jousting show with theme restaurants in the States. No, these blokes dress up in medieval armour. They've got 12-foot long lances, and they're out to kill each other. I've never known people that are so desperate to hurt somebody else. And I'm not talking MMA type hurt. These are people with sheer determination to actually try and kill someone. But they know they've got the suit of armor on, so if they just fall off a horse, they'll probably do themselves damage, because a horse is like 7 or 8 foot high. You're in this 55 kilo, 110 pound suit of armor. You don't bounce. It's unbelievable. But we met this guy. He is the unofficial world jousting champion. He's called Charlie Mason Andrews. He played rugby, involved with the USA Eagles, and he was an MMA fighter and all sorts. This is the guy that says his quote, and we love this quote, and we've kept in touch with this guy for years now. And he goes, people like to live their lives by T-shirt slogans or bumper stickers. But let me tell you, that is the foundation of my DNA. And we use that quite a bit, that phrase. But he's fantastic. He is such a gentleman. But put him on a horse and annoy him, he wants to kill you. He really does. So if you can ever look up jousting, modern day jousting nowadays, you will see how violent and how much the people get hurt, and it is crazy. It really is. So I think that's got to be the most violent, or the most. When we made the shows, we gave every sport a rating. It was a beard rating, so I didn't shave the whole thing, so I had this massive beard by the end of it. And it was the chance of death rating. So the likelihood you may die by taking part in this sport. And I think jousting was our highest.
That's a great scoring system there. But you've been doing this then for about 6 months, but by April, I think that's where you mentioned that you were starting to run out of money, and even though you were getting all of this global media attention, you weren't getting the financial backing to go with it. So at this point then, did you think, you've blown it and that you're not going to be able to see this through to the end?
That's exactly what I thought. In fact, we got back to Australia in kind of Easter time. We had a few commitments in Australia, and Rob kind of pulled the pin, went back to work. I sat on my arse for a couple of weeks and thought, what am I going to do now? This has been a whole waste of time. And Wales, I think the pick-me-up was Wales in the Euros in 2016. Clearly, we'd never been to a major final since 1958, and all of a sudden we start winning. And I think the feel-good factor came, and then all of a sudden, I got a phone call from a mate of mine in the UAE. He says, Beefy, do you want to go to France? Do you want to go to the Euros? And I went, well, let me see if I can get a ticket. And I ring up one of my mates I used to go and watch Newport County with, and he says, mate, I bought two tickets to every Wales game. So the boys have done the quarterfinals and whatever. He says, if you can get here to Lyon for the semi-final, I've got you a ticket. So, unbelievably, I got a staff flight on Etihad through to Paris. I flew out kind of Tuesday night and landed in Paris on the Wednesday morning. I drove from Paris to Lyon, met the boys there at about 5 o'clock, went to the game, we lost, but it was a fantastic experience just seeing that semi-final, because the Welsh guys that were there, I just couldn't believe it. They were just in dreamland all the time. It was a party, and they were just honoured to be in the semi-final of a major tournament. And the atmosphere, normally, I've been away with Wales a few times, and normally the Swansea and Cardiff fans are kicking off against each other. This time, I think we were in harmony for once. I think that, I know we've had the feel-good factor for a few years now, and I think kind of that run in the Euros was probably what started everything off. So through that as well, I got talking to Johnny Owen, who was making I Believe in Miracles at the time as well, and he wanted to get me involved in there, but couldn't you believe it? As soon as we got to the stadium, my phone, absolutely nothing, no coverage. I couldn't text him or anything to let him know where I was. So, but I've kept in touch with Johnny for the past few years now, and we've had him on our radio show here a couple of times. He's a good lad.
Yeah, were you a bit disappointed perhaps with that semi-final result for Wales? Because I watched it on TV, and watching the run-up to it, I thought we're never going to have a better opportunity than right now to get to a final. And I think Portugal were there to be beaten that day as well.
I genuinely think, and I've said this a number of times, Gareth Bale had an opportunity to score kind of midway through the first half, and normally he probably would have scored when he broke away and he was on the right-hand side, and he scuffed the shot. And I think if we'd have gone 1-up in that game, I think we probably would have won. We deserve to be in major tournaments now. That's what's come out of that Euros run, which is fantastic. I'll let you into what happened after the Euros as well. So the Newport boys were up on an 8 a.m. train. There's a Lyon to Cardiff train apparently, so I dropped them off at the station early doors. We'd had a big night because the games were kicking off at 9 o'clock there. So if it's a 9 o'clock start, you can imagine what time we're getting to the hotel. But we talk about bucket lists and all. I know this 365 days of sport sounds like a huge bucket list trip. I'd always wanted to go and see a mountain stage of the Tour de France. So I thought, I'm in France. I'll find out where they are and I'll catch up with the Tour de France. So I drove from Lyon to basically Andorra. So it's 2 6-hour shifts. So one, I stayed somewhere in the middle of nowhere and then got to Andorra early doors on the Friday. So what you don't realise with the Tour de France is they close all the roads. So if you're going to go up a mountain stage to watch the cycling, you've got to park at the bottom of the mountain. So quite stupidly, I parked at the bottom of the mountain. I walked 8.5 kilometres up this mountain. As I'm walking up the mountain, you're never going to believe this as well. I'm walking up the mountain, get a text message from a mate in Dubai. He says, I guess you don't want to go to the final now that Wales haven't qualified, so I've booked you on Saturday's flight back to Australia. Now, I'm in Andorra. I'm halfway up a mountain. I'm flying from Paris. The flight's at 10 a.m. next morning. So I walk up a mountain. I watch cyclists go by for a few hours, walk back down the mountain. I have to drive from Andorra to Paris airport to check in at 8 a.m. to get on this 10 o'clock flight back to Abu Dhabi, get to the check-in desk after driving all night, and they said, sorry, Mr. Blake, the flight's full. Oh, thanks. So I did get on the flight in the end. There was a couple of no-shows, but I was a bit dirty.
So how did you get into the Guinness Book of World Records then? Who made the first move? Who got in touch with who?
They contacted me. They've been tipped off. I think they'd heard about us on World Service Radio. Somebody had got in touch with them. I did quite a few bits and pieces with World Service along the way. So they sent me an email saying, look, we've seen what you're doing. 'Cause I logged everything. Obviously, Instagram, all the pictures are there. We did Twitter. There was all these uploads of everything where we were. So they said, look, we might be able to do something here. Leave it with us and we'll liaise back and forth. So when I finished all the sports, totted everything up, there was 306 different sports that I saw in 365 days. So sent all that through. They came back to me and said, look, how do we know you were there? Okay, well, here's the evidence. Here's all the photos. Here's everything. They went, okay, no worries at all. We don't believe some of these are sports. All right, okay, well, we had to justify what they were. So we actually lived by a set of rules. So sports had to be organised. You couldn't just, like me and you, go down the park, play tennis for 5 minutes. That's tennis done. So it had to be organised. Had to be people actually playing for a result. Win, lose or draw, there was actually something to play for. There had to be a governing body looking after the whole event, and no games of luck. So no card games or dice games or stuff like that, although we did include poker and bridge. So, a bit iffy. Anyway, so we sent all that through of what the event was, where it took place. That took a couple of weeks to justify. Went to one area. They came back to me and says, this looks good, but you need to confirm with us that these are sports. So we went to the Eskimo Olympics in Greenland, and they have a load of what they call Inuit sports, so sports that live on the land. And they said, we've never even heard of these. I said, that's what we're here to do. We were here to show you all these sports that don't exist, that you didn't think exist, but they really do. Okay. So there was things like the Dachshund races that they hold during Oktoberfest, right? And they said, how's that a sport? And I said, because it's organised. There's dogs running to win. It's a bit different from greyhound racing, and this. Oh yeah, we see where you're coming from. So after many toing and froing, it was decided, 306 was the record. So that's how I was officially crowned the world's biggest sports fan.
So the record is there. It's a record now that's there to be broken. So I suppose my final question is, would you do it again? And if you would, what would you do differently?
You need someone. You need an administrator. Somebody's got to organise it, because that was like, I was in Japan. We did the most stupid thing. We went to Japan for sumo wrestling, but we'd had flights being cancelled. There was stuff being moved around on us. I'm 3 o'clock in the morning because of time zones, trying to get cancelled flights sorted out and everything else. Hardly sleeping. It's just madness, the stuff like that. You need someone to look after your PR, because if you're going to do interviews and get that done, that's time consuming. It's just got to be right. It just needs to have. You just need a support crew. It was genuinely myself and Rob. Rob didn't do any of the organising. I did everything. So in terms of that, you need a bit more support on your side to just take on that heavy lifting and getting stuff done. Because if you're also trying to sell a product off the back of it, you've got to have the time to do that, and you can't keep flitting around trying to organise the cheapest accommodation, trying to find flights at the cheapest price. Because when I tell people what we did, and in the space of, I guess, 7 months, let's say, we probably did 400,000 kilometres, 120 flights, probably, many nights in hotels, many nights sleeping on people's couches, rental cars that were dodgy as hell, and literally the cheapest plane tickets you could buy. You're not flying Emirates or Etihad, unless they're the cheapest. You are flying Air India Express or Air Asia or Ryanair on a regular basis. So it's not as if you're staying in London, you've got to get to Stansted or somewhere to fly Ryanair. It's not exactly the nearest airport either. So things like that, you just need that support to get that done. It's all well and good. You need a production crew if you're going to do something with it. It needs to be done a bit more professionally, put it that way. But there's definitely a rawness and a let's say there's a charm to how we did it the first time round.
Yeah, it sounds, when you put things into that perspective, it sounds all the more remarkable that you managed to do the 306 sports that you managed to get recorded as well. So I just want to thank you for joining me on the episode today, Beefy. It's been a fascinating tale of your trip around the world, watching all of these different sports and setting that record, which I'm hoping at some point you are going to break. I'd love to see you do the whole thing again, but perhaps as you mentioned there, a bit more professionally, with a bit more support, and try to get that full 365 sports in as many days. But if anybody wants to find out more about you or more about the journey that you've already been on, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I mean, our Facebook page is probably the most up-to-date, I guess, 365 Days of Sport. I mean, if you go to 365daysofsport.com, there's loads of stuff there. Like I said, I think we did 100 shows. So they're there. They range from about 3 minutes through to 10 or 15 minutes. There's the Daniel Ricciardo interview there. There's loads of other bits and pieces that we did along the way. But, that's the best place to check us out. There is the 365 Days of Sport radio show as well that we do every week still. We've just done our 244th episode of that. Absolute madcap nonsense. It's the only sports show I've ever known with no sport in it, apart from Socially Distant Sports Bar that we, us Welsh, get to experience nowadays. But in terms of that, we just talk nonsense. Although we do throw in a few stories about when we were travelling along the way. But in terms of that's probably the best way of getting us the Facebook page. And I'm available 24/7 if anyone wants to talk to me. I'm more than happy to talk you through. If somebody wants to break my world record, I can help you with that. I would love to see someone other than me break it, by the way. I mean, there's a sport out there for everyone, as we keep saying, and it's Yeah, it's definitely a journey that I would recommend highly. If you've got a spare year and a spare about £150,000, if you want to take a mate, then I can show you the best way to do it.
Now that's an offer that can't be refused, right?
Definitely. Do you know the worst thing as well, Dave? I'm going to be honest. We didn't get to Wales we were scheduled to get to Wales. Obviously, we were going to go and see baseball in Newport or Cardiff. Shove Halfpenny in the Newport pubs as well. I think there were a few other bits and pieces like man versus train or man versus horse up in Llandrydno or Wells. I think they run that. And there's a few coracle racing they run, and the bog snorkeling, obviously. We can't miss Wales' national sport. So we didn't get to Wales, and that's probably one of the biggest regrets I have about running out of money before we got to God's own country.
So now you don't have any excuse not to do it again now, and I think you need to make Wales your first port of call when you do
I think so.
the 2.0 version.
Yeah. I think we should kick it off with the bog snorkeling, and then go from there, really.
Yeah, that would be, setting the bar really high, first of all.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been great. I've loved to hear your stories, and if you do decide to do this all again, then I'd love to have you on as a follow-up as well.
Not a problem. Absolutely not a problem. Thank you for having me on, Dave. I really, really appreciate it. And I mean, as you can tell, I do enjoy talking about it. It's such a unique thing to have done. I love spreading the word about it and just shedding a bit of light on what a stupid idea it was in the first place.
And on that note, I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much, and I'll catch up with you again very soon.
No problem, Nostar.
If you enjoy Engage, please show your support at engagersclub.com, our exclusive members-only club with enough content, training and behind-the-scenes access to keep you going until the next episode. That's engagersclub.com. Also, please rate and review this podcast wherever you download them. Stay engaged.